Hey, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to part 9 of the 10-part intro to Java programming tutorial. In this tutorial, we will learn about how to write our very first algorithm. So we're going to put together all the concepts that we've learned. We've already taken into account classes and different libraries that Java provides. We've written some while loops, for loops, conditionals. We've learned so much, and we're just going to put it all together in this, and we will be doing some manipulation with our calculator class, reading in from different files, and that should do it. So in the previous video, we learned about the available Java libraries to read in a file. So if you haven't seen that one, I'll leave a link above. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. So the first thing that we will do is press Control Option N. And we're just going to create a new file, and we'll call this my input this time, .txt. So we'll say my input. And in this file, we're just going to write a bunch of different numbers. And at the end, we will put different operators. And these operators are going to be things like a plus sign, a minus sign, a multiplication sign, or a division sign. And we're going to use this to essentially read in a file line by line and perform the operation that we want to do. And one of the benefits of this is that, say, for example, we had a file that was 1,000 lines long or 2,000 lines long. We can just read in the file line by line, do the manipulation, and then print the result to the screen. So we're just going to write 5 lines, and you can write as many as you want. We'll keep the numbers short since we'll be using ints. So make sure that they're just less than 1,000 for now. So we'll say something like 20, and then we'll separate it by a comma. No spaces, please. Otherwise, you will run into issues. We're not going to do any sanity checking in this program. So make sure that you follow exactly what I'm doing. So we'll say 20, comma, 10, comma, and then we'll add these two. Then we can say just new line there. Then we can do something like 10 and 10. And then we could do some division. So this result will be 30. This will be 1. And we'll do a couple more. 50, comma, 25. And we could say subtract that. We could do 100 and let's say 2. And then we could say multiply that. And then we'll do another line. So we'll just do 5 lines for this one. And we'll say 25 and 30. And we can say add those. All right, so we created a file with some input, and there's no space at the end. Make sure you have no spaces. And we're separating each one by a comma. And at the end, we have our operators. So we're going to use conditionals. We're going to use a loop to read in every single line. We're going to use conditionals so we can check, hey, what operator is this? That way we could perform the right operation, and we'll use our calculator class to do the math. So let's go back to our my program class, or whatever it is that you called it. So my program.java. Again, I just shift just to pull up that search menu, and then I type in the name of the program. And here we see that we initially have our reading part of the program. And next, what we will want to do is change the file input name from input to my input, since that's what we call the new file. So we've changed that to my input. And then now we can remove this system out print line. And essentially, we're going to write the majority of our code here. So remember, initially, what we had was this buffered reader, which is reading our file line by line. So we'll need to read the file line by line and then manipulate each part of that particular line. And remember, we separated things out with commas. So this is going to come into play when we do this. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to say, we're going to define our numbers and the operator. So we can do something called line dot split. And this split operator will say, this is a method that's available for a string. This split operator will say, hey, I will take whatever you give me and I will try to separate the string out into different components. So let's go back to our diagram here just so we can understand. We'll create a new one and we'll say this is a string and we have 5, 6, and then star, for example. A string has a method called split, and split essentially will say, give me what I should break this string up into. So we're going to tell it, I want you to break the string on the commas. So what Java is going to do, it's going to create a data structure called an array. So we could think of an array of just a bunch of different little boxes or different categories. And it'll say, great, I'm going to break this up. And I will say for each comma, I'll just separate the string. So it's going to place 5 in one little bucket. It's going to place 6 in another bucket. And then it's going to place the operator in another bucket. And the beauty of this is that it'll allow us to access each member individually or separately. So we can say, hey, I'm going to take the 0th element. So in programming, the first element is always the 0th. I could take the first element and I could take the second element or the third element. So this is what we're going to use. We're going to use this split method from the string class. And this should help us be able to read the line and manipulate the different objects. So let's go back here. And here we have line.split. So we're going to split. And again, this split is looking for a string. So we're going to use our double quotes. And for the double quotes, we will say, I want you to split on a comma. So now we can close that. So we need to define a variable for it. That way we can use it. And the variable we're going to define is called an array. So an array is essentially this data structure that I described here, which is just a different little bucket for each one of the parts in the string that it's split. So we're going to say string, and then you define an array by using this open and close square bracket. And we're going to call it tokens, or you could call it members or items, whatever you want to call it. It's up to you what you want to call it. We're going to split on the comma. So now string of tokens looks like the following. So if we were to create this bucket here, this would look something like 5, 6, and star. All right. And this is just an example. The next thing we'll want to do is we know that our first element is an integer. We know the second number is an integer. And then we know the last item, and it should be like this. We know that the last item is the operator. So one of the things we could do is we could say int a, which is going to define a variable, is equal to, and we're going to use this variable, tokens at the 0th position. Okay, so we ran into an issue. So again, this is a string. So one of the things that we need to do is convert the string into an integer. And in Java, this is called casting. So we need to cast to an integer. And in Java, the syntax for that, and again, these are all built-in libraries that we can use. No need to focus too much about that. Just know that this is very syntactical. We could say integer dot parse int, and so we'll create an integer out of the string, and we're casting it to an integer, and it's creating the int a out of that. So now whatever is in this first element will be stored into a. And then we know that the second element which will be the first. So if we just go back to here, we know that this is our 0th, our first, and then our second. If we go back to that, then we can just copy and paste this line above or rewrite it. We'll say that int b is equal to tokens at the first position. And again, we run into the same issue. We need to do this parsing, which means convert the string format of it into an integer. That way Java knows how to manipulate numbers. So integers are just numbers, whereas a string is just, text. So in order for you to add numbers, they have to be numbers in Java. So we'll go ahead and say integer.parse int, and we can close that. And then for the last one, it's a string. So we'll just go ahead and keep it as a string, and I'll show you how we will verify what kind of operator it is. So there's multiple ways to do it. We're going to do it one way here. So the first thing we'll do is say string and then op or operator or whatever you want to call it. We'll call it operator so that it's clean, is equal to, and then tokens at the second position or the third, right? So this is 0, 1, 2, which is essentially just first, the second, the third. And there we have one line. So on every single line, we have the number separated by commas, another number separated by comma, and then the operator. And this is the same for every single line. And this is the beauty of having this while loop, is that for every single line, we're going to do the same thing. We will split on the comma. We will create an integer out of the first number, create an integer out of the second number, get the operator in string format, and then we'll do some manipulation. So now let's move on and do that. So the first thing we'll do is we will check what each of these operators are before we do anything with them. So remember, now we can use conditionals. We can use the if, we can use the else, and we're going to put them together and know exactly what operators these are. So the first thing is we will say if, remember our condition goes in there, open and close curly brace. We can say if operator dot, and then so this dot operator allows us to access methods and attributes from the string class. We can say operator dot, and then we can say equals. And then we'll say if it's a multiplication, then we'll want to do something. Okay, so we'll say if it's multiplication, we want to multiply numbers. And we can say else if, so we did not introduce this when we were working through the conditional tutorial. However, this just works the same way. So else if, so if it's a multiplication, do this. Else if it's something else, do another operation. Else if it's something else, do something else. And as long as the condition is met, it will run that piece of code. So we're going to go ahead and say if operator is equal to, now we could say addition, then we'll do some addition. We could just add a little comment here and say add numbers. And then we could say again, else if operator equals, and we could say minus, then we could do another operation. We'll just say subtract numbers. And we could do the same thing again for division. So we'll say if it's division, and we're just saying if this operator is equal to the division sign, then we can divide numbers. All right. So this kind of takes care of the conditionals, but we need to do the operations on the numbers. We haven't yet been able to do that. We haven't done anything yet. So we're missing something here. And remember, we created a calculator class before. So here, just to go over, we have our main method. Here we are reading file, or rather preparing a file to read. And then here we're actually reading file line by line. And then here we have our loop, which will take each line and then perform the operation on each of the lines. So just going back to our calculator class, we need to create an object of calculator so that we can use it. So we're going to do that up here. And the reason why we're doing it up here is because we don't want to create a new calculator every single time that this is running. We could just use the same calculator over and over. Would you buy a new calculator every single time you have to do a math problem? No, right? So we don't have to do that in our code either. So we'll create it outside of this loop. That way we only create it once and use it as many times as we want. So this is why we're creating it outside of the loop. So let's create the calculator. And again, I'll just quickly open up calculator so we can take a look at it. This is our calculator class. We have the constructor, which will allow us to use the new operator to create this class. And then we have these methods. Nice and easy, right? We have the calculator and we can reuse that. So we'll go back to my program and we'll create the calculator in here. So we'll go by saying calculator, which is the type, and then we can say calculator is equal to a new calculator. And that's it. So we just created a calculator, and now we're going to be able to use this calculator to perform each of our operations here. So let's go ahead and do that. So now we can say, let's multiply these numbers, and we'll say calculator dot. So remember, dot allows us to access the different methods and variables that are part of a class. So we'll say dot and multiply. And then we can take the two numbers, A and B, that we read from the file. So A and B. So this will take care of that. And one of the things we can do is we can print that out. So we'll create a new, or rather, we'll just print that out here by saying system.out.println. That way we print out the result. Nice and easy. Okay. Then we could do the same thing for each one. We could do it for the addition, the subtraction, or the difference, and the division. So we'll say calculator dot and then add and then A, B. But we want to print that out. So we'll go ahead and print that out. And then let's go ahead and just delete that. And then we can copy and paste and just change the method. So let's go ahead and just copy and paste that just to speed up the video. And we will say multiply, add. Here we have subtract. So we can say subtract. Here we have division. So we can say divide A and B. So this is taking the input line by line. We're separating this out by splitting on the comma, and then we are reading in the integers as well as the operator, and then we're performing some operations on this, and then we'll print I'm done after we're done reading our program. So let's go ahead and run this. I'm just going to click on the play button over here and run main, and let's see if we get a result. So I'm going to pull this up and take a look. So here we have some result that's printed, and then we see I'm done. One thing that I will do is just pull up our myInput.txt, and let's just make sure that our answers look good. So we read in 2010, and then we added them. That should be 30. So we got 30. Then we read in the second line, we divided 10 and 10. That should be 1. Then we took 50 and 25 and subtracted them. That should be 25. Then we did 100 times 2, and that should be 200. And then 25 plus 30 should be 55, which means that our program is working as expected. And then at the end, we printed I'm done, because again, each line is run in order as it's given to us. or as it's given to Java. So we just wrote our very first algorithm. So an algorithm is just something that is reproducible, that you can repeat over and over again and get the same result. And we know that we now created a calculator that takes the input from a file, adds the numbers, does whatever operation we give it, and prints that out. Now, this program won't take into account bad input. So if you put bad input in, you will get an error somewhere. So make sure you follow the tutorial as we have written it. However, in more advanced topics, if you guys want to see tutorials like that, how to read in input and I guess clean it up and make sure that it's valid, we can go into that. But for now, this is a very basic program, very basic algorithm, and congratulations on making it this far. So again, we learned many things during this tutorial. In the next tutorial, we will discuss a full review about all the topics that we learned. We won't go too into depth. We'll just give a very clear outline of what we did and how we arrived at where we are now. So if you guys like this tutorial and want to see more, please leave a comment and a like down below. This will really help me understand whether or not these tutorials are okay for you guys. And that does it for this one. So thanks again, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.